Hello, I'm Mike and this is Will. We are the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
And we're actually bringing you 2 issues of Warhammer 40,000 Combat Patrol magazine today, issues 27 and 28. These issues both came with a pair of Aeldari Windriders, which you should be able to make because they come with the bases as well, so you should end up with 4 after this. And issue 27 also came with some more data cards for the Aeldari and the upcoming Chaos Forces, as well as a few more bits of terrain and so forth. So we'll be looking through the magazines, but we'll only be playing one game for both issues because there are actually no new rules, and we'll only be playing the Tyranids versus Space Marines again, without anything new to talk about. We're looking through issue 27 first. We have the build guide for the Windriders. Now fairly simple to put together. There aren't too many parts. So you can see here, putting the bike together, you get a bit of variety for the front cowling. There's some little targeting computers you can have raised or lowered, and you have the weapons, so you'll want to end up with 4 with twin-link shuriken catapults and 2 with scatter lasers at the end of all this, and there you can see the riders as well. It does suggest keeping the base and the bike separate to make them easier to paint. I would also suggest keeping the rider separate as well, just so you can get all the details in the seating area. Then for the painting guide, we're going over another technique, which is after you've applied a shade to an area, going over again with the original colour just to bring up the brightness. You can see an example here of relayering a termagant with the wraith bone for its flesh. And some other tips where if you do multiple thin layers, you can vary the number of layers you do, so you can actually get a sort of natural gradient on some areas, particularly useful for big areas like the rear end of the sarcophage. And if you make any mistakes, you can just go over again with the shade and relayer from there. And so, as I said, going over the Tyranids, you want to relayer all of the flesh. It's going to be quite a long process, but once you're finished, it's brought back a lot of the colour, and it will contrast nicely with all the recessed shading. Don't forget the teeth of the sarcophage, and also on the dead Screamer Killer on the captain's base. And for the Space Marines, you'll want to relayer the Corax White over the captain's right shoulder pad, as well as the Crux Terminatus and all of the Terminators. And again, for the Aeldari, you want to go over their helmets with Corax White, and Screamer Pink over the Farseer's robes. And you can see it's just brought back a lot of the colour, gives a nice, smooth, clean look to those areas. And there you can see for the Tyranids. Then we have some more lore on the Aeldari, going over the Aspect Warriors. So these are the elite fighting forces of the Aeldari. The Aeldari god Cain, the bloody-handed god, has many aspects, and the Aspect Warriors all represent one of those aspects. They will spend years or decades training in these aspects, and few other forces in the galaxy can claim to be so elite. So first up we have the Dire Avengers, which represents Cain's unquenchable thirst for revenge against all the many mistreatments the Aeldari have suffered. The Shining Spears, who are elite jet bike riders, pilots of the utmost skill and daring, and excel in raw speed and accuracy. With the Warp Spiders, who are named after a small spider-like creature that crawl around a craftworld infinity circuit. They are equipped with these short-range teleport packs that allow them to jump through the warp, and they have to be particularly brave because they must face the perils of the warp and risk death on the battlefield. Howling Banshees are elite close combat troops who are known for their harrowing, blood-curdling shrieks as they charge the foe. Striking Scorpions are also elite close combat troops, but they go for a more stealthy approach, and they will hide and strike at the correct moment with their chainswords and their helmet-mounted blasters that fire clouds of needles. Fire Dragons will study the weak points of their foes so they know exactly where to shoot and are adept at taking out large monsters and vehicles. Dark Reapers deliver death from afar with their missile weapons, and they have advanced sensory equipment built into their helmets. We have the Swooping Hawks, who wear specialised wing plates and grav packs that allow them to hover over the battlefield and rain down grenades and laser fire on the enemy. And finally, the Crimson Hunters, who are elite fighter pilots who fly Nightshade Interceptors. Now we'll be looking at issue 28. We have some more lore on the Aeldari, going over the hosts of the dead. So we've seen these Wraith constructs like the Wraith Lord before, essentially animated Wraithbone constructs piloted by the souls of fallen warriors. A couple of different types. We've seen the Wraith Lord. There's also Wraith Blades, who will be equipped with melee weapons, and Wraith Guard, who are similar constructs but we use range weapons instead. And these Wraithbone constructs are semi-organic that respond to psychic energies and can actually self-repair gradually, are actually much tougher than some of the other materials like ceramite that are used by the Imperium. And so here you can see a Wraith Guard and a Wraith Knight, but also a Spirit Seer, who is a living Aeldari who will guide the Wraith constructs during battle. Seeing as being spirits of the dead, they don't really perceive the world in the same way as the living. Now we have some backstory on the Drukhari, the dark kin of the Aeldari. They're an arrogant and callous group who essentially hide in the webway in great cities, the largest of which is Komorra. So hidden deep in the webway, they are insulated from Slaanesh, although they are still at risk of having their souls devoured in the same way as the regular Aeldari. However, rather than using spirit stones, the Drukhari instead literally survive through the torment of others. So they will often emerge from the webway to conduct slavering raids, take a load of captives, and as long as they can maintain this constant supply of torment, they will not have their souls absorbed like Slaanesh. And because they're hidden in the webway, it's very hard to defend against them or counterattack them, and they still have animosity with the Aeldari. They don't particularly like each other, although they do both ultimately believe in the supremacy of the Aeldari race, and both aim to keep Slaanesh at bay, so the Asuryani and the Drukhari will still ally with each other when all else fails. And now going on to some different lore, we have Warzone Bastior. This is a subsector that is close to the Segmentum Solar and is under attack from the Tyranids as part of the Fourth Tyrannic War. You can see here the subsector as the Tyranid invasion begins, a tendril of the Leviathan High Fleet called Grendilus. This is mostly just background information, it's not actually going over the major battles as of yet. And then some background on some of the major figures of the Imperium that took part in the battles over this subsector. So we have Captain Agaman of the Ultramarines First Company, Vario Tigurius, who is the Chief Librarian of the Ultramarines, Trajan Valoris, who is the leader of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's elite personal guard, and Lord Solar Leontus, who is the Supreme Commander of the Astra Militarum, the mortal human soldiers of the Imperium. And then we have background on the Horus Heresy. Towards the end of the Great Crusade, the Emperor left to work on some other project to look for outward threats, but was blind to threats from within as Horus Lupercal, one of his Primarchs, betrayed him and recruited 8 of the remaining Primarchs and plunged the Imperium into a civil war known as the Horus Heresy. Although at the end Horus was killed, the Emperor was mortally wounded and was interred in the Golden Throne, where he remains to this day. And then after the Horus Heresy, the Imperium was thrown into decline, regressed into fear, superstition and ignorance. Technology is barely understood anymore. Religious zealotry is firmly established at the heart of the paranoid government and is always surrounded by threats, while the traitors also fell into disarray, into loose warbands and chaos worshippers, and have been corralled together by Abaddon, the arch-traitor who leads the Black Legion, who we'll no doubt learn about in the future. And finally, more of the continuing short story about the Silver Templars Bonds of Honor. The narrator is talking about the bonds of brotherhood between the Space Marines, and some more about Sergeant Askerton and his taking of the oath to reclaim his lost bolt rifle, although in doing so he attracts the attentions of the Aeldari. That's it for all the lore. We just have the collection article for the Windriders. So again, you can give them a name and keep track of when you've built, painted and played with them. Windriders are jet bike riders, not to the level of the Shining Spears, but for the citizens militia of the Craftworlds, they are still highly skilled. And here we have the data sheet for the Windriders, although we won't be needing that yet. We'll see them in the next issue. So I'll hand you over to Will now. There are no new rules in these 2 issues, but it does go over some of the core concepts for playing a full game of Warhammer 40,000.
So before we get into the game, we'll have some content from both issues. And once again, there's actually nothing new rules-wise presented in either of these 2 issues, so that's why we're only going to be playing one game, because otherwise it'd just be the same game twice with the same forces, basically. But first up, we have an introduction to the core rules of Warhammer 40,000, which we're going to be getting over the issues to come. So this page is a very high-level overview of what Warhammer 40,000 is all about. We've obviously already seen a lot of that before, but there is a little important bit tucked in here, which is that in a game like Warhammer 40,000, sometimes things can happen that it's not entirely clear what is actually supposed to be the case. So the easiest way to resolve that is you and your opponent have a discussion about it, and if you still can't decide, roll a dice or flip a coin and decide what's supposed to happen that way, so you can get on with playing the game rather than worrying too much about the rules and focus on having fun. And then there's a further introduction specifically focusing on the Combat Patrol collection and how the rules we've learnt so far are fine for a basic introduction to the game, but to add more tactical depth and storytelling to your games, you'll probably want to start using the core rules as we get them. So as it says, while Warhammer 40,000 is obviously a tabletop game, it is an interactive storytelling experience. You can also use your imagination to imagine what would actually be happening if these were real combatants. And you can also use these core rules to start playing larger games as well, beyond simply the Combat Patrol collections. And there's a QR code in the bottom right corner which will take you to the Warhammer community website where any updates to the rules are presented, because sometimes, as it says, they do change things or adapt them to make the game a better experience for everybody. And also there you will find frequently asked question documents that might explain something that you're unsure of or how to interpret a particular situation. Then on the next page we have a contents page effectively for what will be to come. So this page can go at the start of your rules section if you take the magazine apart and put it into the binders, what sort of things will go in sidebars and summary boxes and so forth. And then we have the cover page for the Space Marines Combat Patrol, and each Combat Patrol will have one of these, and the Combat Patrol is actually called Strike Force Octavius, and it details which models are in the Combat Patrol and what weapons they are equipped with. In all the cases we've had so far this has been fairly obvious, but it does tell you exactly what to expect. And indeed there's a picture of the captain and the librarian here, even pointing out what their weapons are on the model. And the same for the other units on the back, and there's a picture of the entire Combat Patrol with the letters that you'd find on the previous page to denote exactly which units are which. And then we have exactly the same for the Tyranids. Their Combat Patrol is titled the Vardengast Swarm, and once again you have a list of all the models in it and what they're equipped with, and a picture of the Tyranid Prime and a Von Ryan Sleeper, and then a picture of the entire Combat Patrol once again. And then moving to issue 28, we have some core concepts that are used in the core rules. This is effectively the first section of the core rules themselves. So we start off talking about missions, which is a game you would play. An army is all the models that you're using to play the game, and they're divided up into units. And the units have data sheets which have keywords on them. Again, we've seen all these things before, but this constitutes a formal definition of all these things. Something that is covered in more detail here is unit coherency, which is where every model in a unit needs to be within 2 inches of at least one other model in its unit at all times. This is more rigorously defined here, including that if a unit is 7 or more models, every model has to be within 2 inches of at least 2 models in its unit, rather than just one, in order for the unit to be in unit coherency. And also every model has to be within 5 inches vertically, which only matters if you have terrain that is taller than that. Obviously with this collection we won't have that. And the same treatment for engagement range, which we know about already, but again there's a vertical component. You have to be within 5 inches vertically of the enemy model, be within engagement range. There's also a definition of the battlefield and terrain features, and then measuring distances, where it specifies you measure always between the closest points of the bases on the models in question, or if it doesn't have a base, you measure to the closest point of any part of that model, and what it means for something to be within. There's also a sidebar about wobbly models, which is where sometimes a model can physically stand somewhere, but in order to save your precious model from being in a risky position, you might want to move it somewhere else so it doesn't get knocked over and break. It's fine to do that as long as you remember exactly where it was and hold it back there if someone needs to measure or check line of sight or something to it. Speaking of line of sight, we have the section on visibility and various definitions here. So a model is visible if you can see part of it from the point of view of another model. A unit is visible if one or more models in that unit are visible to an observing unit. A model is fully visible if you can see every part of it, and a unit is fully visible if you can see every part of every model in the unit. And sometimes those definitions will come up in the context of other rules. Then we move on to dice, which is fairly self-explanatory. Warhammer 40,000 uses d6s. Sometimes you have 2d6 or 3d6, so you roll them all and add them together, and there's a chart explaining exactly how a d3 works, which again we've seen before, and re-rolls, where if you need to re-roll something, you re-roll all the dice, and you do any re-rolls before modifiers, and you can only ever re-roll something once. There's also some hints about dice rolling and how to deal with dice that are not fully flat, or cocked dice. Essentially that's left down to the player's discretion how they want to treat such circumstances, but there's some advice here. And there's also a bit at the bottom about sequencing, which is where if 2 or more things happen at the same time, the player whose turn it is decides what order they do happen, unless it's outside the battle, like before the start of the game, in which case you roll off to see which one happens first. And finally an overview of the battle round, which we've seen before, so I won't go over that any further. And so that just leaves us to get into our game, where we'll be having another game with the Space Marines and Tyranids Combat Patrols. So here we've set up the wasteland side of our 2 terrain boards for another game of Clash of Patrols, the mission we have so far, with the Space Marines and the Tyranids already deployed, and you can see the objectives in their diamond formation around the centre, 1 at the top, 4 at the bottom, 2 and 3 to the left and the right. But we have used our new terrain cards that came with issue 27, so the top left one there is basically a pile of barrels, so we put some barrels all over it, and the one with the crate on it is actually a sort of sunken crate, but we don't have one of those, so we just put a large container on top like that. And just like the other non-barricade terrain, those will be treated as completely line of sight blocking and infinitely tall. So we'll have a look at the Space Marine deployment. I've brought the librarian and not replaced him with the chaplain, and the captain is attached to the Terminators, and everybody's starting on the board because deep strike is generally not a very good idea with this combat patrol. Keeps too many things off the board too early. So we've got the Terminators in the centre of the board by Objective 4, then the librarian and the Infernus Marines on the right hand side. And on the other side we have the Tyranids.
Yep, and I'm bringing the Parasite of Mortrex, as you can probably see, just to get another Synapse creature on the board and see if I can make a difference with that. So I've got it in amongst both units of Termagants, this one behind the barricades, and this one here out of line of sight of the Terminators. And we've got the Psychophage directly opposite the Terminators. while the Tyranid Prime is over on the other side to try and support the Von Ryan's Leapers who have infiltrated behind that bit of line of sight blocking terrain.
So all that's left to do is roll off to see who's going first, and remember the winner does have to go first. Well, I rolled a 2 for the Space Marines and a 6 for the Tyranids. So we'll be into Tyranids turn 1.
Nothing in the command phase except gaining command points, so the 2 Termagant units advanced, 1 unit getting towards Objective 2 and the other towards Objective 1, so I can hopefully sticky both of them. The Psychophage is just moving up, getting some cover behind that bit of terrain just in case the Librarian tries to shoot at it. Parasite and Mortrex moving up behind it as well to spread synapse range to it. And over here the Von Ryan's Leapers and the Tyranid Prime have moved out to try and charge the Infernus Marines. In the shooting phase, both Termagant units are going to shoot at the Terminators because they're the only thing in range, and I'll roll them all together and I'll have 11 shots between both units.
And that resulted in 2 wounds, so we have 2 2+ saves. Oh, okay, well that's not the best way to start the game, but we'll lose 2 wounds on the Terminator.
Onto the charge phase. Well, I'm going to do the Von Ryan's Leapers first. They're going to charge the Infernus Marines. They will probably end up getting in the way of the Tyranid Prime, but as long as one of them gets in, I'm not really fussed, and their charge is shorter. So, needing about a 7. Well, 3 is definitely not enough, so I'm going to re-roll it into an 8. I think that is going to be enough. So their charge finishes like that, and I think I'm going to leave the Tyranid Prime on Objective 3, so I'll get victory points for it next turn, hopefully.
So there's only one fight to do, therefore, which will be the Von Ryan's Leapers get to go first.
Yeah, they're just going to pile in. So 18 attacks from the Leapers, hitting on 3s. 14 hits, wounding on 3s. Yeah, so that's going to be 8 wounds at -1.
8 4+ saves, modified. We only actually failed 2. And you know what, I've got command points, so I'll re-roll one and see if I can save a Marine. Yes, we only take 1 wound. They actually did alright and got 4 wounds, but they're no AP on the Leapers.
So 4+ armour saves, made 3. Take 1 damage.
And that will be the end of the turn, on to Space Marines turn 1. So I'm going to put the Oath of the Moment on the Von Ryan's Leapers and try and get rid of them, and then the Librarian has moved behind them, Terminators shuffling a little bit towards them, and the Infernus Marines falling back behind the Terminators, which brings us to the shooting phase, where the Librarian can only see the Von Ryan's Leapers, so he'll target them, and he'll use his Focus Witchfire Smite. So that gets d6 shots for 5, which hit on 3s re-rolling because of the Oath of the Moment. Oh, it's 4s re-rolling actually because of stealth. Oh, that's the reroll helps. They all hit and they wound on 3s because it's strength 6. They all wound at AP -2.
6s. Didn't make any.
So these are d3 damage one at a time. The first one will go on the one who's wounded, who has 2 wounds left. So that one dies. Then we have another one which does 2 damage, and then dies from the third one. And then we have 2 more which I can roll at the same time. Yes, they kill the last one. So
they're all gone.
The Librarian does the job, but he might injure himself because he used a hazardous weapon. Oh, he rolled a 1, and he takes 3 damage and is down to 2 wounds remaining. So the Terminators are actually free to shoot at something else, so they'll shoot at the unit Termagants over near Objective 2. Do the Assault Cannon first, hitting on 3s, we've got 5, and wounding on 2s against Termagants. 6s are devastating, there's 1 devastating, and 3 saves to make.
3 5+ saves, made none, so that's 4 dead so far.
And then including the Captain, we've got 4 wounds from Storm Bolters.
5s again, saved 1, so that's 7 dead Termagants in total.
So there's 3 Termagants left over on Objective 2. And the Librarian might as well declare a long charge on the Tyranid Prime. He is wounded, but if he can get in and do some damage, it might still work out well. And if he makes it, it'll also stop the Tyranids holding the objective if the Librarian survives. So he probably needs to roll a 9. Oh, he rolled an 11, so he's in. So with that, he will go behind the Tyranid Prime, so he's a bit further away from the Psychophage, and then he gets to attack. The Librarian has 4 attacks that hit on 3s. They get 3 hits, and they wound on 3s as well, because it's strength 6. He got 2 wounds at AP -1.
5s. They both.
Ah.
And then 6 attacks from the Tyranid Prime on 2s, getting 5. Strength 6 versus toughness 5, so 3s, getting 3 wounds at -1. I'm going to re-roll one of those failed hit wounds. Nope, 3 wounds.
3 3+ saves. Oh yes, you failed 2 of them, so even with a re-roll, the Librarian cannot be saved. Takes 2 damage and dies. So the Librarian may be being a little bit too brave there, but that'll be the end of Space Marines turn 1, and we'll head into Tyranids turn 2.
So I'm going to gather intelligence on Objective 3, because I will hold it, and I need to make a Batroc test for these Termagants. They are Leadership 8, I roll 3d6 because they're in range of a Synapse creature. So they get a 9 and they're okay, which also means I sticky Objective 2, and I hold 3 objectives so I get 15 victory points. So for my movement, the weakened Termagants are just moving a little bit closer over objective 2. Parasite Mortrex is staying nearby to babysit them. I don't want to send it out ahead because it might get charged by the Terminators. And the Psychophage is moving up in the middle to hopefully charge the Terminators and hold them up. The other Termagants advance so they can go and sticky objective 3. Objective 1 was stickied in my command phase, and the Tyranid Prime has moved to fight the Infernus Marines as well. So I'll start my shooting with the Termagants. Both units are going to shoot the Infernus Marines, and I'll just roll them all together. We've got the 3 on the left and 6 in the unit on the right.
And they got 4 wounds, so there'll be 3+ saves. We failed 2, might as well try and re-roll 1. Nope, still failed.
And finally the Psychophage is going to use its Psychoclastic Torrent on the Terminator, see if I can kill that wounded one, so it would end up getting +1 to hit in melee. D6 shots for 1. I'll spend a command point to re-roll that. Into a 5, that's much better. Went 6, so wounding on 3s.
3 wounds at -1. And failed to save, so the Sergeant will die.
Charge phase, do the Tyranid Prime first, he's going to go into the Infernus Marines. Right, I'll roll it, 6 is definitely enough. And the Psychophage is going to go into the Terminators. He gets a 9, that's going to be enough as well. So Psychophage going into the Terminators, while the Tyranid Prime going around the back of the Infernus Marines. Both my units go first, so I'll do the Tyranid Prime first. 6 attacks on 2s, getting 5, and wounding on 3s, getting 2.
With a 4+ save, well, he does kill the wounded Marine.
And then the Psychophage has D6 +1 attacks for 7, and these are going to be hitting on 2s because the Terminators have taken a casualty, and so they're below starting strength. Getting 5, and wounding on 3s, 6s will be devastating. No devastating, but 4 wounds at -1.
So 4 3+ saves. Failed 2. I'll re-roll 1 because it'll keep a Terminator alive. Yes, so 2 damage only. And all the Terminators can get in, so they can all fight. Captain has 6 attacks on 2s. They all hit. And wound on 5s. 1.
5+ armour. Nope. Feel no pains. Block 1.
And then 12 attacks with Power Fist hitting on 3s. Only 6 hits, wounding on 5s. 3.
3 more 5+ armour. Didn't make any. So that's 6 damage. Feel no pains. Shrugged 2 more, so it's taken 5 damage and it's down to 5.
And the Infernus Marine's got 1 wound on the Tyranid Prime.
Failed its save. It's down to 5.
Well, that'll be it for Tyranid's turn 2 on 2 Space Marines' turn 2. So I can gather intelligence on objective 4 and get an extra command point, but then before I can score any points,
I'm going to unleash Shadow in the Warp.
so I have to take a battle shock test on both units. The Terminators and the Captain are leadership 6. They pass with an 11, and the Infernus Marines are also leadership 6, and they also get an 11. So I do at least gain 5 victory points, and then the Infernus Marines fell back from the Tyranid Prime, but that got them within range of the Termagants to make their Scuttling Horrors special move, which they did. They rolled a 6 and moved more of themselves onto objective 3. And the Terminators will stay in melee with Psychophage, which I put the Oath of the Moment target on. So there won't be any shooting because we're in melee or fell back, and then we're on to the fight phase where the Psychophage gets to go first.
So it has D6 +1 attacks for 4. Hitting on 2s. They all hit. Wounding on 3s, 6s are devastating. 2 wounds, no devastating.
2 3s. Made them both this time. And I can now roll all of these together because with Oath of the Moment and Fury of the First, they're all hitting on 2s and they'll all be wounding on 5s because even the Power Fists wound on 5s. And they're all -2 AP, 2 damage. So we're hitting on 2s, re-rolling with 18 attacks. 1 to re-roll, which is a hit, so 18 hits. Or 18 hits, wounding on 5s. That was 8 wounds at AP -2.
Yeah, so 8 5+ saves. Ooh, I made 4 of them. So I might as well re-roll one of the fails, try and keep it alive. Nope. So 8 damage going through, going to have to block some of these. Re-block 3, that's not going to be enough, so it's going to die. Does it deadly demise on a 6? No.
So we do take out the Psychophage, but we are behind at the end of Space Marines turn 2. As we head into Tyranids turn 3.
I'm going to gather intelligence on objective 2, so I get up to 3 command points. I'm getting another 15 victory points, go up to 30, and these Termagants have to make a battle shock test again. 3d6, they're fine with a 10. So my movement, this unit of Termagants advanced, and they can all get on objective 4, which means I'm going to end up taking that because the Terminators and the Captain are only 1 each. Parasite of Mortrex is coming along with them. Other unit has moved around so they can all see Infernus Marines, while the Tyranid Prime has moved up behind the Infernus Marines as well. I think all the Termagants, actually these 3 probably can't actually see the Infernus Marines in that box, so those 3 have to shoot the Terminators and the other 10 shoot the Marines, and we'll just show the results.
There are no wounds on the Terminators and 2 on the Infernus Marines, who failed both saves with a double 1, so we lose an entire Marine. But I don't need any small CP this phase, so I might as well reroll one. Yes, we take 1 wound.
Then in the charge phase, Tyranid Prime's going to charge the Infernus Marines. It is within 11. The Parasite and Mortrex might as well try and charge them just so it can do something other than babysit Termagants this game. Needs a decent roll to get where I want it to go. A 7 might be enough. Not enough because I want him to end up on the other side of the box, not engaging the Terminators. So re-rolling into a 3, it's not enough. Just the Tyranid Prime, 6 attacks on 2s. I'll re-roll one of those that miss. There we go, 6 hits. 3s. There we go, 6 wounds at -1.
6 4 pluses, failed 2, and might as well reroll one of them as well. Into a success, so we lose 1 Marine, the injured one. And in return, they got no wounds. So that'll be the end of Tyranids turn 3, and we can actually call the game here because 3 Termagants are enough to beat 5 Terminators on an objective somehow. So I don't hold any objectives, I get 0, I'll be on 5, and then there's no way I can take all 3 objectives from them, so they're going to get enough that I can't possibly catch up.
You might be able to take objectives 2 and 3, but I'm still going to get 10 in that case.
And we know that the Terminators can probably clean up the remaining Tyranids, because even the characters can't really hurt them much, but that's not going to matter on the points. So it'll be a Tyranid victory, and we'll recap that for you now. So that was a game for issues 27 and 28 of Warhammer 40,000 Combat Patrol magazine. How did you think that went?
No, I can't really complain about how it went. Pretty much as how I planned. I was able to hold up your Infernus Marines for the entire game so they didn't get to shoot, and I was able to pin you in around Objective 4. Although that said, if your Librarian hadn't died, I think you would have been in a much better position because I wouldn't have gotten as many victory points because I wouldn't have held Objective 3. Tyranid Prime wouldn't have been able to go and charge the Infernus Marines because he had a really good roll with his shooting and killed all the Leapers and then damaged himself and got killed. It was actually a fairly major swing point in the game.
Yeah, it was a pretty spectacular display of psychic might, but then it came back to bite him, as it were. And if he'd survived, he wouldn't have been able to charge the Infernus Marines, so they would have been able to move. And once again, they didn't get to shoot in this game, which, as we said before, usually means that the game isn't going well for me, because even one round of shooting from them can be quite effective. The Terminators were very effective against the Psychophage once it had Oath of Moment on it. The Infernus Marines' saves were quite good. The Librarian, as we said, the Smite was very effective, but none of that really mattered when I can't move and take objectives.
Yeah, and we got to see probably the first game where Synapse was actually relevant, where I was able to keep 3 Termagants not battle shocked, and that's 6 OC, and just walked onto your home objective. So Parasite and Mortrex just babysat the entire game, basically. Oh, and we did learn about Big Guns Never Tire in the previous issue, and technically the Psychophage would have got to use it if it had survived another round.
Yes, it could have shot the Terminators in melee. Actually, since it has a torrent weapon, it doesn't roll to hit. It's not affected by the -1 to hit, so it's quite a useful rule for it.
And I suppose we are getting the core rules, which makes sense, I suppose, considering Combat Patrol can be its own thing, but I suppose it makes sense to get the core rules because it's a good stepping off point into the full Warhammer 40,000. So it makes sense to get those, even if they aren't the most interesting things in the world.
Yeah, and even if there's a lot of text to actually go over in the video. And I suppose you can see why it makes sense to only do one game for both issues, because this would have just been the same game again. I mean, we could have rearranged the terrain, I could have brought the Chaplain, I suppose, but fundamentally, this matchup depends quite heavily on who goes first.
Yeah, so we're not adding any new rules. I think once we learn about more stratagems, I think this will be a lot more balanced, especially things like Overwatch for the Infernus Marines. That would completely change how I have to approach them. Yeah. But obviously we'll learn about that in the future, hopefully.
And the Space Marines also get a couple of their own stratagems which do help mitigate some of their weaknesses, but again, we don't have those now.
Yeah, and I'm pretty pleased to know that I think issue 30 does come with the second scenario for Combat Patrol, so we'll be a little bit more variety, and we'll have the finished Aeldari one as well we'll be able to use.
Yeah. Yes, and speaking of which, we obviously have got now 4 of the 6 Windriders, which we'll be seeing all 6 of them on the battlefield next issue when they have their own special scenario. So we won't talk about their rules, but we can talk about the modelling, I suppose, at least. They're very easy to put together, and they're all the same. The only thing that's worth making a decision about is what gun you want to give them, or if you don't want to make a decision, you can put magnets in all of them, although you need a lot of magnets because you get 18 guns between the lot of them. And unlike in the Combat Patrol, where you only have 2 of the 6 with heavy weapon, they can actually all be given heavy weapons in the full rules. So magnetising them does make sense because most of the time you don't want to bring the shuriken catapults because they're just not as good. And the 2 heavy weapons are good against different targets, so you might want to swap them out sometimes between games if you're bringing a larger Aeldari army.
And there's also a good way to get the most out of your models is using magnets, so they come in 3s normally, so it probably is a decent saving actually.
I imagine it would be 3 for about £30, so getting 6, yeah, it is probably half price. But I think that's all for these 2 issues and this one game, so let us know what you thought below. If you really didn't like the fact that we got cheated out of a game, then do feel free to complain.
Yeah, hopefully this will just be a one-off case, because once we start getting more missions and more combat patrols, we'll be able to vary things up a bit more. It'll be a bit boring watching exactly the same game over and over.
But anyway, do leave your comments down below, leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. We've been the Tabletop Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.